Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. And you can watch this program through our Facebook and YouTube channel, Radyo Pilipinas World Service, and you can hear this broadcast on our audio streaming over PBS Evox receiver app, and also on our shortwave broadcast through following shortwave frequencies: 12.020 megahertz, 15.640 megahertz, and 17.665 megahertz. And this is your host, Jerome Toledo. Let's begin Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
This week, on particularly Monday, February 2nd, Senator Erwin Tulfo was officially elected as the new chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, succeeding Senator Amy Marcos. The motion to elect Senator Tulfo was made by Senate Majority Leader Juan Miguel Zubiri during a plenary session. Senate President Pro Tempore Panfilo Lacson explained that the shift was necessary because the Foreign Relations Committee panel is considered a major and significant committee typically reserved for members of the majority bloc. Senator Amy Marcos, who remains in the minority bloc, expressed her gratitude to the Department of Foreign Affairs and highlighted the 13 treaties that was ratified under her leadership. And 2 days after Senator Tulfo's assumption on the role on the Foreign Relations Committee, he met with Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro for an initial briefing on Wednesday, February 4th. From there, he identified several key focus areas for his chairmanship, such as extradition, avoidance of double taxation, and the recognition of higher education qualification. And this year, he will lead the committee while the Philippines takes its chairmanship of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. And what can we expect on the leadership of Senator Tulfo on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? To give us more analysis regarding that development, we now have on the line as usual, our guest for this program, Professor Renato De Castro, international studies expert from De La Salle University. Good morning, Professor De Castro. Thank you so much again for joining us in the program Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Good morning, Jerome, and good morning to our listeners.
All right.
Here in the Philippines and abroad.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So, Senator Amy Marcos often emphasize a neutral or independent stance, as we call it, that sometimes critique the administration's proximity to the United States. And with Senator Tulfo's more vocal and at the same time populist approach, such as suggesting a review of the One China policy. So, for you, Professor De Castro, do you foresee the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations becoming more aligned with the President's transparency initiative, or will it be a more hawkish one?
First, let me explain what is the function of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Number one, of course, the Senate plays a very important role when it comes to the ratification of the treaty. That's the most important task of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, primarily because that's the task of the Senate, to ratify any agreement that has been entered into by the executive. The second element, of course, is in terms of reviewing, looking at subjecting, of course, the executive to review regarding very important foreign policy issues. The Foreign Relations Committee should have two very important characteristics. Number one, of course, it's independence. It has to ensure that the Senate, the legislative, is of course separate and independent, capable of coming out with, of course, an independent or its own view regarding certain foreign policy issues. And second is a balance. That is very crucial, a balanced approach. As of course, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or the Senate itself has to ensure that it's a separate, distinct branch of the government. Of course, it's within the legislative. It has to ensure that it has a balanced approach. So regarding your question, I mean, I think my main critique, as an academic, and of course, even as a Filipino citizen, regarding the chairmanship of Senator Amy Marcos is that it's far from being balanced. No, she has been very consistently critical of our alliance with the United States. That was shown when she launched a very intensive and critical review of the president's decision, the administration's decision to increase the number of enhanced defense cooperation sites way back in the early part of 2023. And of course, she raised an issue regarding a commercial deal wherein, of course, the United States Navy would transfer some of its petroleum from Hawaii into Subic Bay, given the fact, of course, that Subic Port is a free port. So it's entirely a commercial deal, but she torpedoed the deal. Although it has nothing to do with foreign policy, it has, of course, a commercial deal between a semi-government entity and, of course, the United States Navy through, of course, a company. But, of course, as we have noticed, obviously, she has been very silent when it comes to China. She never raised any issue. She never conducted any hearing regarding Chinese harassment of Philippine Coast Guard vessels, of Philippine Navy vessels. She was silent when you have that incident that happened, I think, in 2024, when you have the incident where you have a service personnel from the Philippine Navy who lost his thumb, and that was around June. Then, of course, when you have the incident last year, when you have a collision between a Chinese Coast Guard vessel and a Chinese destroyer that was, of course, trying to harass a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. That was August 12, 2000. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee was so silent. So it's an indication that she's far from being balanced. My expectation with Senator Tulfo, at least a bare basic, is to maintain a balanced approach. Of course, the United States are treaty allies close to us, but at the same time, we have to ensure that we also have to conduct investigations or hearing when it comes to Chinese harassment or coercion of Philippine government vessels and, of course, ordinary fisher folks.
Okay. All right. I understand, Professor De Castro, that Senator Tulfo is just assumed his position, the chairmanship of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and at the same time, as I see it here, Professor De Castro, in my point of view, Senator Tulfo is relatively new in this particular field, particularly in the foreign relations. How do you see what will be his stance at this time as he assumed the committee chairmanship of that said committee?
Well, based on his, I don't know if he's the same, because we have brothers, the Tulfo brothers, who's been very active when it comes to the cause of the Filipino OFW.
All right.
I simply cannot remember whether it was him or his brother who was, of course, the host of a radio program.
Yeah, that was Senator Rafi Tulfo.
The same, right?
Yeah.
So he was at least very much aware of the flight of the Filipino OFWs. We have to commend him for that. So I expect him to, again, give attention to the flight of the Filipino OFWs, the Filipino...
Professor De Castro? Professor? Okay. Okay, we seem lost connection with Professor Renato De Castro, the international studies expert, as he explains about the expectation of what he expects from Senator Erwin Tulfo as he assumed the chairmanship of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And earlier he mentioned about the Senator Amy Marcos, which Senator Erwin Tulfo succeeded. He said that Senator Amy Marcos was silent, or if we put this if we put it this way, Senator Amy Marcos did not acknowledge of what happened or what China did to our Philippine forces. Okay. Okay, so we will try to call again Professor Renato De Castro regarding the issue or this discussion, particularly the assumption of chairmanship of Senator Erwin Tulfo. But in the meantime, okay, so we will have a very short break here in the program. Front and Center will be right back after this message.
Sa isang bagong Pilipinas, hindi dapat makamba ang pamilyang Pilipino sa mga bayarin sa ospital. Kaya naman sa Zero Billing Policy, libre ang inyong paggamot sa lahat ng mga Department of Health hospitals. Mapa-inpatient, outpatient, o emergency services. Isama na rin ang mga mamahaling gamot, lab tests, therapy, at marami pang iba. Libre ang inyong paggamot. Ang pangangalaga sa kalusugan ng mamamayan ay ang ating pangunahing tungkulin dahil ang serbisyong medikal ay karapatan at hindi dagdag pasanin.
All right, and we're back here in the program, Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Still with me, Jerome Toledo. I think that we now have Professor Renato De Castro back on the line. Professor?
Hello, Jerome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, where was I cut? On the One China policy, I believe.
Yes. I'm sorry about what do you expect on the leadership of Senator Erwin Tulfo on the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations?
Well, of course, my expectation is that he will be balanced, unlike, of course, the previous chair, which tend to, of course, be highly critical of our treaty alliance with the United States, but at the same time being kind of timid when it comes to Chinese aggressive action against the Philippine Navy, the Philippine Coast Guard, and ordinary Filipino fishing folks in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea area.
Okay.
So hopefully, although, as he has to, of course, ensure the independence of the Senate, he could be critical also of our alliance or security relations with the United States. But at the same time, he should also subject, of course, Chinese action and behavior against the Philippines in any Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing.
Okay.
So we hope that he will have that balanced approach. And more importantly, he has also raised the issue in the past few months or years, the importance of subjecting to a review, an intensive, probably an interagency or a governmental review of the One China policy.
Yeah.
As an academic, my focus has, of course, been the fact that our One China policy has been so rigid, so legalistic, that in a way it comes out as, in a way, no different from what the Chinese government or what the Chinese embassy would basically ask us to apply a One China principle.
Okay.
Because people and our government should be aware of the difference between a One China principle and a One China policy. As a sovereign and independent state, the Philippines should stick it out with a One China policy.
Okay. All right. And that's that's going to be one of the issues that Senator Erwin Tulfo must handle as he assumed that chairmanship or the chairship of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And it's worth a review of this one China policy. And you mentioned about you expect him to be critical with our alliance with the United States. And also, my question here, Professor De Castro. So, he recently suggested toning down the rhetoric against Chinese officials to help code of conduct or COC negotiations. So, and at the same time, he also suggested direct dialogues between the Philippine Senate and the Chinese embassy. I think that's regarding the
I
remarks of
don't
the
think that's
Chinese.
going beyond.
Okay.
That's not the task of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee could not conduct any diplomatic relation with the embassy. That's the task of the executive.
Mm.
He has to be aware of what are the functions of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or the Senate. The role of the Senate is simply, of course, to concur or ratify any agreement entered into by the executive, and of course to subject the actions of course, the executive to occasional, of course, also depending on the issue to what they call this, a review or a hearing. But the Senate could not conduct any direct negotiation with the Chinese embassy or the Chinese Foreign Ministry. And that is going beyond the task of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Philippine Senate, and of course the legislative. That is the task of the executive, specifically, of course, at the President and the Department of Foreign Affairs. He could subject, of course, current developments in Philippine foreign policy to a hearing. But I don't think it's proper for him to initiate a direct dialogue with the Chinese embassy in Manila. It's going beyond its bounds.
Okay, it's gonna be an overstep of his role as a chairman of that.
Of course. I don't want him to come out ignorant of the task of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's not the task. In fact, senators should not communicate directly to the Chinese embassy. Probably they could meet in social gatherings, but when we talk about direct negotiations, of course, it's really challenging to determine what could be considered as official diplomatic to what is social.
Okay.
That's easier said than done. But the proper behavior, of course, is the proper decorum is they could have, of course, social engagement with, personnel or even the Chinese ambassador, but it should only be limited to the level of social personnel. They could discuss probably issues that affect both countries, but they could not basically take the function of the Department of Foreign Affairs when it comes to diplomatic negotiations.
Okay. Okay. So meaning to say, Professor De Castro, they could not do direct negotiations or dialogues with the Chinese embassy. What he can do is to review the One China policy and at the same time the visiting forces agreement that we have with the United States. Is that correct, Professor De Castro?
Or of course, he has been. I don't know. He mentioned the fact that the intense and of course not and hostile exchanges between the Chinese embassy and some government officials. What he could basically do is call for a hearing, but he cannot tell, of course, the executive that this is what you should do, this is not what you should do, because that's a prerogative of the president.
Okay.
Prerogative also of the National Security Advisor. Prerogative of the Department of National Defense, prerogative, of course, of the Department of Foreign Affairs. What I could advise him and suggest to him is he called for a hearing.
Okay.
Why do you have the government seemingly coming out with different voices when it comes to foreign relations issues?
Okay. Okay, and we'll take note of that particularly, and we will watch out for that. If Senator Tulfo can actually stick to his stick to his role as the Foreign Relations Committee at the Senate. But I would like to ask this or to ask your point of view regarding this one because recently he filed Senate Bill 1625 to mandate education about the West Philippine Sea in school. So, as an academic, how do you view this a particular Senate bill which he filed now that he assumed the chairmanship of the Foreign Relations?
That's a positive development because Filipino citizens should be aware of the most pressing national security issue that we face, and that's, of course, developments on the South China Sea, specifically, of course, understanding the July 12, 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and also understand the root cause of the tension and, of course, dispute in the South China Sea, and that is, of course, the fact that we have a very powerful, strong, confident, and very and affluent neighbor that is simply bent on expanding into our maritime domains, and that's no less than China. That should be understood
Mm-mm.
by every Filipino citizen. Also understand the importance of history.
Yep.
Because, again, we have to deconstruct, we have to challenge the Chinese narrative that they have owned the South China Sea since time immemorial. Our students should be aware, Filipino students and citizens should be aware of our geography and our history. Now, our history tells us that the South China Sea is a sea common to all. China has never dominated or controlled the South China Sea in history. It's only now that we're seeing China's effort to expand and eventually control almost the whole of the South China Sea.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's jump here on the non-permanent seat plan of the Philippines at on the United Nations Security Council, because Philippines is applying for that non-permanent seat at that council for 2027 and 2028. So, what kind of image does the firebrand or what kind of image does Senator Tulfo project to the international community? Because we are applying for this, I think, powerful seat at the UNSC.
I think he could subject again the executive to a review or a hearing, ask them why the executive wants the Philippines to have a seat in the United Nations Security Council. But this is primarily the ball game of the Department of Foreign Affairs and the executive.
Oh, okay. And they can
So
give
again,
me
at the end of the day, he has to be aware of what is the task of the Foreign Relations Committee. The task of the Foreign Relations Committee, as I mentioned, has to do with treaty ratification and, of course, occasional hearing to, of course, ensure that there's a degree of accountability on the part of the executive branches of government that are involved with foreign affairs and national security.
Okay, okay. My last question here before we end this interview, because as we know, Senator Erwin Tulfo is known for his strong demeanor or behavior. Because he's used to have a lot of television shows or radio shows, projecting his strong image towards people who have committed mistakes or who have violated law. So, how do you see the way he leads or the way he will deal with our allies in particularly the United States, Japan, Australia, and India? Because, as mentioned, Professor De Castro, he has a strong demeanor. So how do you see that?
I don't think he will be directly involved when negotiating with the diplomats or personnel from the from the U.S. or U.S. State Department or from the U.S. Embassy or from the Japanese Embassy. His task is simply in the Senate Foreign Relations. That's a task of Filipino diplomats and of course, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and the Secretary of National Defense. That will really matter a lot during Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings, where you, of course, have to instill a degree of respect and even possibly fear among our Filipino government officials when
Okay.
they would have to face them during Senate hearings.
All right. Okay. 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 If there will be a chance that you will have face-to-face conversation with Senator Erwin Tulfo, and if you will be given a time to talk to him, what will be your line of conversation with him, Professor De Castro? What can you advise to him?
I will I will advise him to, review a very important issue that will affect the Philippines, especially, of course, 100. And again, she's a champion when it comes to Filipino OFWs. That will affect the security and welfare of roughly about 190 to 250,000 Filipino OFWs. That is, of course, the issue of Taiwan. So again, he earlier, when he was still an ordinary senator, he raised the important issue of the our one China policy. Probably it's high time for us to review and understand the importance of a one China policy that serves the interests of the Philippines, not a one China policy that is almost similar and synonymous to China's one China principle. This is something, of course, ordinary Filipino should understand. Why Taiwan is important to us, why we need to review and understand how, a one China policy that serves the interests of the Philippines, not the one that China is trying to impose on us on the basis of its one China principle.
All right. All right. Very well said. Okay. And with that, thank you so much, Professor Renato de Castro, the international studies expert from De La Salle University.
Thank you very much, Jerome. And again, good morning to all our listeners here in the Philippines and abroad.
All right. Okay, and with that, we now conclude this edition of Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And we would like to thank our technical team headed by Mr. Milo Janela, on Warcast, Hiro Lucero, and audio streaming, Justino Cias. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Until next time, mabuhay.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.